The water arrived without sound. No river, no rain, no visible source, and yet it flowed. Through stone channels carved with impossible precision, across valleys held high in the air, into the heart of a city that should never have had enough. Rome did not wait for nature. It bent it. Far beyond the walls, hidden in distant hills, the water began its journey, captured, redirected, forced into a path it would follow for miles. It did not rush wildly. It moved with control, guided by a gradient so precise it is almost invisible, a fall so slight that the eye cannot see it, but the empire could feel it. And beneath the feet of every citizen, the roads stretched outward, straight, unforgiving, endless. Stone laid upon stone, cutting through forests, over mountains, across lands that did not belong to Rome, until they did. Because wherever these roads reached, Rome followed, water above, stone below. Together, they formed something more than construction. They formed control. This was not just engineering. It was domination, built to last. Rome did not conquer the world by force alone. Its armies were powerful, disciplined, and relentless, but they moved along something far more enduring than weapons. Beneath every march, every expansion, every connection between distant territories, there was infrastructure, quiet, unyielding, precise. The Roman world was held together not just by authority, but by systems that allowed it to function at a scale rarely seen before. Among the most remarkable of these systems were the aqueducts and the roads. They were not simply tools of convenience. They were instruments of control, designed to shape both the environment and the people who lived within it. The aqueducts began far from the city. Often sourced from springs or rivers in elevated regions, they captured water at a point where gravity could do the work. This was the foundation of their design, not force, but balance. A slight, continuous slope allowed water to flow naturally across long distances without interruption. The precision required was extraordinary. Too steep, and the water would damage the structure. Too flat, and it would stagnate. Roman engineers mastered this balance, creating channels that maintained a consistent gradient over miles of terrain. One of the earliest examples, the Aqua Appia, constructed in 312 BC, demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach. It ran mostly underground, protecting the water from contamination and enemy interference. As Rome expanded, so did the scale of its aqueducts. Structures like the Pont du Gard rose above valleys, carrying water across open space through multi-tiered arches that combined strength with efficiency. These were not merely functional, they were statements, visible proof of Rome's ability to reshape the natural world. Within the city, the water distributed through a network of pipes, fountains, baths, and private residences. Public baths became central to Roman life, spaces of hygiene, social interaction, and leisure. Fountains provided accessible water to the population, reinforcing the idea that Rome could provide what nature alone could not. This distribution was not equal. Access to water reflected social status. Wealthier citizens could afford private connections, while others relied on public sources. Even in abundance, hierarchy remained. The aqueducts also required constant maintenance. Channels had to be cleared of mineral buildup, structures inspected for damage, and flow regulated. This created a system of labor and oversight that extended the influence of the state into daily life. Water, once a natural resource, became something managed, controlled by Rome. And where water flowed, so did dependence. If aqueducts brought life into the city, roads extended its reach outward. Roman roads were built with a level of durability and planning that allowed them to endure for centuries. They were not simple paths worn by use. They were constructed layers of stone, gravel, and sand, carefully arranged to provide stability and drainage. The surface was often paved with large stone slabs, fitted tightly to create a smooth, solid path. The design was deliberate. Roads were typically straight, cutting directly through the landscape rather than winding around it. This reduced travel time and reinforced a sense of order imposed upon nature. Where obstacles existed, hills, rivers, valleys, they were overcome through engineering solutions. Bridges were built. Hills were cut through. Valleys were crossed. Rome did not adapt to the land, it reshaped it. One of the most famous examples, the Appian Way, connected Rome to the southern regions of Italy. Known as the Queen of Roads, it facilitated the movement of troops, goods, and information. It was not just a route, it was a lifeline. Through it, Rome could project power quickly and efficiently. Armies could march where needed. Supplies could follow. Messages could travel. The road made distance manageable, and in doing so, it made control possible. But roads also carried something else. They carried presence. Every stone laid, every mile completed, marked territory as part of the Roman world. Even in regions far from the capital, the existence of a Roman road signaled authority. It connected distant lands to a central power, creating a network that bound the empire together. For local populations, these roads were both opportunity and reminder. They allowed trade, movement, and communication. But they also ensured that Roman forces could arrive at any moment. The same path that brought goods could bring soldiers. Together, aqueducts and roads formed a system that extended beyond construction. They shaped behavior. They created dependence. They reinforced hierarchy. They allowed Rome to function not just as a city, but as an empire. A structure of immense scale, held together by lines of water and stone. And once those lines were established, they were difficult to break, because they were not just built into the land. They were built into the lives of the people who relied on them. Once the water began to flow, it could not simply stop. Once the roads were laid, they could not be ignored. Rome had created something that extended beyond its walls. A system that reached into distant lands, into daily routines, into the very rhythm of life itself. And like all powerful systems, it demanded to be maintained. Aqueducts, despite their elegance, were fragile in their own way. Not weak, but dependent. Dependent on constant care, constant oversight, constant protection. A single collapse in the structure, a blockage in the channel, a miscalculation in flow, and entire sections of the city could be deprived of water. And when water stopped, everything changed. Public baths fell silent, fountains dried. The movement of the city slowed, then strained. Water in Rome was not a luxury. It was expectation. To lose it, even briefly, revealed how deeply the population depended on something they could not control themselves, because the source was far away. The system was complex, and only Rome could maintain it. This dependence extended beyond the capital. Across the empire, aqueducts supplied growing cities, places that expanded not because of natural resources alone, but because Roman engineering made it possible. Settlements formed where water could be delivered. Populations increased where supply was stable. The land itself began to follow the lines Rome had drawn. And yet, these lines could be broken. In times of conflict, aqueducts became targets. To disrupt water was to weaken a city without direct confrontation. Siege warfare often focused on cutting off supply, starving not just bodies, but systems. Rome understood this. and protected its infrastructure accordingly. Guards, repairs, constant vigilance. Because the strength of the empire depended not just on its armies, but on the systems that sustained them. The same was true of roads. At first glance, they seemed indestructible. Thick layers of stone, carefully engineered foundations, drainage systems that kept them intact through seasons and storms. Some roads lasted for centuries, their surfaces worn smooth by endless movement. But their power did not lie only in their durability. It lay in what they allowed. Movement. Fast, direct, uninterrupted. Roman roads turned distance into something manageable. Messages that once took weeks could now travel in days. Armies could respond quickly to threats. Governors could communicate with the center of power. Trade could flow more freely. But with movement came control. The empire could see further, reach further, act faster. There were no isolated regions, only places not yet connected. And once connected, they became part of Rome. For those living along these roads, the experience was constant. The sound of footsteps, the passing of carts, the presence of soldiers. The movement never truly stopped. The road did not belong to the people. It belonged to the empire. Milestones marked distance, but also authority. Each one often bore the name of an emperor, a reminder that even the path beneath your feet was part of something larger. Something controlled, something watched. And yet, like the aqueducts, the roads required care. Maintenance crews repaired damage, cleared debris, ensured that the routes remained usable. This created another layer of labor, a workforce tied to the infrastructure, sustaining it day after day. Because without maintenance, even the strongest road would fail. Over time, these systems began to shape more than movement and supply. They shaped identity. Cities connected by Roman roads became part of a network, sharing culture, trade, language. The flow of goods was matched by the flow of ideas. Rome was no longer just a place. It was a presence. Everywhere the roads reached. And the aqueducts ensured that where Rome settled, it could stay. But systems this vast come with a hidden truth. They are powerful until they are not. When the empire weakened, when resources became strained, when central authority began to falter, maintenance slowed, repairs were delayed. Oversight diminished. The lines that once held everything together began to fracture. Aqueducts fell into disrepair. Sections collapsed, water flow interrupted. Cities that had grown dependent on constant supply were forced to adapt or decline. Roads, though more resilient, also suffered. Without regular upkeep, surfaces degraded. Travel became slower, less reliable. Communication faltered. The network weakened, and with it, the reach of Rome, because what Rome had built was not just infrastructure. It was connection. And when connection breaks, so does control. Rome did not conquer the world in a single moment. It did it slowly, carefully, with stone and water. The aqueducts carried life into the city. The roads carried power out of it. Together, they formed something greater than either alone. A system, a structure, a quiet force that shaped how millions lived, without ever raising a weapon. To walk a Roman road was to move within Rome's reach. To drink its water was to depend on its control. These were not just achievements of engineering. They were tools of empire, designed to last, designed to bind, designed to ensure that once Rome arrived, it never truly left. And even when the empire itself began to fade, the roads remained. The stones still set into the earth. The lines still visible across landscapes that had changed. Because some forms of power do not disappear, they endure. silent, unmoving, long after the armies are gone. And the voices have faded. The paths remain,